we asked the panelists to focus their presentations based on, this microphone keeps going in and out. Based on what ideas they want you to go away with that would be most helpful for your programs or for you to learn from, because basically the more you know, the more people in your programs know. Also, how can anyone get involved in the issues that they're working on? And don't forget to mention websites if you have them. And how particularly youth can get involved with some of the issues. Some of the people up here, like down at the end of the Catalyst newspaper, she's not so much going to convince you on an issue, but we asked her to be a part of the panel because she can give you facts and she can give you some information on what's going on in the schools from an objective point of view, as she was talking about earlier. With the panel discussion, you'll see that it's a pretty big range of people from different things, and I like to do that with the panel discussions that we plan, because I always think that the purpose of a panel discussion is not to convince you of one point of view, it's to give you a lot so that you can come up with your own point of view. And that's a big focus for me. I'm not a big fan of going to discussions and people are, you know, well, I want you to believe this, and this is like this, and this is like this. You know, that's not what we need to be teaching people, and not what we need to be teaching our youth. We need to teach them how to critically think. You know, how do you take these things, follow up on them, and then think about it later? So, I'm going to go right down the line again, and I also asked them if they had any tips or suggestions or recommendations to end them up.
Yeah, no, thanks. So first off, I just kind of want to talk about, you know, really just the issue at hand that, I deal with the organization. So really, since the inception of the program, I mean, the CEC has done, you know, numerous studies about just really entrepreneurship, and I guess really around 2005, the Motorola Foundation actually released the sponsor. They said, you know, we want to sponsor you guys. You know, we really like what you guys are doing with the current generation of entrepreneurs. But however, how can you guys leverage your talent to motivate the next generation of entrepreneurs? And thus, that's really how Future Founders was born. So with a lot of these studies that we've done, we really realized that, you know, there are a lot of African Americans out there who are really passionate about entrepreneurship and actually really want to start their own business. However, they don't have the resources or really just the kind of guidance to do that. So really through this program, one of the things that we do with this program, I'll talk a little bit about that and I'll kind of get into more of the mentoring aspect, is that we more kind of ignite the entrepreneurship spark in these students, and we help them understand that it is possible for you to go out there and start your own business and, you know, become in charge of your own destiny and just really become your own boss, really is kind of what it is. Just really become your own boss. You don't have to work for anybody. You don't have to, you know, be that one person who has to answer to higher management or senior level management executives or whatnot. You can actually own your own business and have your own employees. So through this program, the students actually build a business plan. Like I said, through the counseling of entrepreneurs. So what does that mean? Part of my role is to bring entrepreneurs and other business executives in Chicago into the classrooms, and they sit down with the students one-on-one and helping them build their business plan. So just kind of more on a calendar basis, just kind of maybe help you guys understand exactly what it is that we kind of focus on, is that the program starts in late September with an event we call Big Idea Day, which is where we bring all of the students that we work with and we bring all of our mentors to an event space at UIC, and we kind of host a networking event. So in a way, it's kind of like a crash course introduction to the program to new students. It's a way for the students to meet some of the entrepreneurs that they'll be working with. It's a way, and it's also a way to help the students start thinking of a scalable business idea for their business plans. And then from October through March, that's when the mentors are coming into the classrooms and helping the students work on their business plans. So from October through December, it's kind of more the idea generation phase, where the students are brainstorming various ideas with their mentors. And then from January through March, the students are actually building out their business plans. Now, the business plan is a PowerPoint template that is provided by one of our strategic partners, NIPT, which is a network for teaching entrepreneurship. And so the students take their actual business ideas and they incorporate it into this PowerPoint. And the mentors that we work with are kind of more facilitating that whole process. And then in April, starting in April, we have our competition season, which students compete for a chance to advance to our annual citywide business plan competition, which is always held in early May. So students actually compete in that competition for college scholarships and for seed capital for their businesses. But first off, I just kind of want to highlight, and I want to get the other panelists to talk, I'll stop talking, is that we want the students to go to college first. I mean, that's pretty much our goal right there, is that the students go to college to get a college education and then actually come back and start their own business. Now, we've had different types of scenarios where students have actually started their business in college or even in high school, but really our first goal is to have the students get a collegiate education or a collegiate degree. And like I said, really this program is just to just give them the skill sets that they don't really get about owning your business. So through this program, the students learn about building an income statement. They learn about the 4 P's of marketing. They learn about the problem in their market. They do a lot of market research. So these are skills that they actually get through this program that they might not even get in their regular high schools. So that's one of the things that I'm very passionate about. And then, so yeah, and that's really kind of what it's all about though. So really just kind of getting back to the issue at hand is just really kind of helping these students understand that they can become their own boss. So yeah, thank you.
Okay, so whatever your area of specialization or interest is, be it education, mental or physical health, law, art, whatever it is, it's important in working with youth that you should be aware of how the criminal justice system impacts them, especially youth of color and youth in communities. So you might be asking yourself, what is the prison industrial complex? So for those of you that don't know, it is the intersecting interests of government and industry that uses surveillance, policing, and imprisonment as solutions to economic, social, and political problems. If you examine our society, you'll see a dramatic reduction in government funding for all areas of public service, such as education, affordable housing, mental and physical health, welfare, drug rehabilitation, job creation, etc., which has led to an increase in poverty and the accompanying social ills. How has our government responded? Basically, they've criminalized most disadvantaged members of our society and built more prisons to house them. So just to give you an idea of what the system looks like, in 1972, the prison population was about 200,000. There are currently 2.1 million presently behind bars. The majority of those are people of color. The U.S. now has by far the largest population behind bars in the world, far surpassing even the most repressive regimes, and no other society in human history has imprisoned as many people as we do right here in the United States. The U.S. imprisons a larger percentage of its black population than South Africa did during the height of apartheid, and there are more black men in prison today than there were slaves in 1850. While today's crime rates have dipped below the international norm, the U.S. boasts an incarceration rate that is 6 to 10 times greater than any other industrialized nation. More strikingly, by Brown versus Board in 1954, there were 98,000 blacks in prison nationally. Just half a century later, this figure has jumped to 910,000, an 829% increase. Blacks and Latinos make up 62% of the incarcerated population, though they comprise only 26% of the national population. And black women make up the fastest growing prison population. But let's get one thing straight. The overwhelming majority of prisoners are not there for violent crimes, but rather for non-violent offenses. So as a result of all the policies such as, we've seen simultaneously with cuts in social spending, we've seen the proliferation of spending on the criminal justice system, the proliferation of spending in the area of in building prisons, and all that. So, because you need to house, you need somewhere to house all these people that are being targeted by the criminal justice system, including their repressive laws. So as a result of all the policies such as the war on drugs, the war on illegal immigration, you can see in poor communities and communities of color, enhanced police presence, surveillance, targeting, profiling, and harassment in our schools, You can see zero tolerance policies and militarization in underfunded schools, which has replaced guidance counselors with police, led to exclusionary discipline practices that have led to high dropout rates that funnel youth into the juvenile justice system and later to prison. And you can also see, as I've discussed before, the simultaneous reduction and extinction of services for these disadvantaged communities. So the PIC Teaching Collective, which I'm part of, has long-standing, they have developed certain tools to help empower community members to fight against the PIC, which has far-reaching and devastating impacts on our youth and their families. Some of the things that we've done, as I discussed before, was developed popular education workshops. We have teaching materials. There are things like that youth are directly involved in, such as under Project MIA, there's a Girl Talk, which is a program for girls ages 12 to 17 retained in Cook County Detention Center. We have the Missing Project, which describes itself as our response to the intentional disappearance of parents, community, and engages children in public art project that aspires to make, that empowers prisoners and victims of the prison system in Chicago. There's numerous programs and services that the Teaching Collective is part of. If you go in, we have two websites. Well, the Teaching Collective is www.chicagopicccollective.com. And you can also look at the general website of Project NIA, which is www.project-nia.org. And you can look at the numerous resources and the ways that we have helped you to develop skills to fight against the PIC. Thank you.
So I'm going to talk a little bit two of the mentoring initiatives that we have at Gads Hill Center, because we have people from Marcia here coming to talk to one of our staff retreats, and it was really interesting to see, especially how the school system is becoming more and more about police and criminalization. So at Gads Hill, as I was mentioning earlier, we focus on developing the assets of the community, the children, the youth, and the families that we serve, and kind of to frame the conversation with the title about social justice and education. Both mentoring programs are after-school programs, and we have a strong civic engagement and social justice approach. And the way I see social justice is, okay, in order to have a more socially just world, we need socially just kids, right? We need to make sure the kids are aware of what's going on in the community, are responsible, are caring, are culturally sensitive. And for me, that translates to we need good people out there. So even though I think we all want our kids to go to college, for me, the most important piece is to make sure that the kids, once they graduate from one of our programs, they are better citizens, better individuals. Like, I want you to be a good person. I want you to get straight A's, but I want you to be first a good person. Because I think sometimes we associate like an A student with a really good student and a good person, an F student with like terrible person, bad kid, and we all know that that's not always the case. If you are an A student, that doesn't tell me if you are a good person. The same way that if you're an F student, I think we all seen how many F students are extremely, wonderful, committed, and dedicated. Just didn't have the opportunity to show that. So building leaders is you were asking about tips or things that we do. I'm going to kind of describe the programs, and I know probably most of the components are similar, but Building Leaders is a mentoring program for high school students. It's a program that started at Kelly High School in Barton Park, for those of you familiar with the area. Kelly High School is the most overcrowded CPI school. It's supposed to house like 1,600, and right now there are like over 3,000 students. So there's a lot going on there. So we came in there 2 years ago. We got a list of students that were by CPS labeled as high at risk. Whatever that means, but basically that meant that they were disconnected from the school, disconnected from the community, and they had some encounters with the juvenile system, with the criminal system. So we created Building Leaders. It was basically the idea of turning their lives around. So instead of seeing them as these, parts of the community that nobody wants to have, to turn them into actually a very active and useful part of the community. So we created. We call it the social justice approach. It was just basically, we decided to do 1 month, 1 cause. So every month we would dedicate to immigration, education, health, and we would just work around that topic for the entire month. We would have individual mentoring sessions, we would have discussion groups, and we would have field trips, service learning opportunities. And that became the highlight of the program, and it's still the highlight of the program. And again, preaching to the choir, but it's amazing how these kids who pretty much everybody dismisses, and they're at risk, basically they're dropouts, mostly dropouts, so who cares, that they think they're not engaged. We would, for Thanksgiving, we went to a food pantry Friday morning to distribute food for the community. They were, they wanted to do it more. They were thinking, and we did it again this year, because after that day, like, okay, next Thanksgiving, just make sure that, we come back again, 5 in the morning, okay. That was a really inspiring moment, and kids, teenagers coming to you saying, you know what, I feel scared, I'm helping, and actually some people care that I'm here, and so, I'm valued, and I think that's very important, that they feel that you're valued, because otherwise, if you wake up in the morning, why would you get up if you feel that nobody needs you or values you? So that was an approach that we had. We did homelessness, so we went to the night ministries in Ravenswood, and we helped them sort out some hygiene products for the distribute in the trucks at night. We actually had an immigration summit here at the University of Chicago. MECHA, one of the student organizations, they organized for us a tour of campus and had some panelists. And for them, it was an experience to be at the University of Chicago, in a summit, and all that was all created for them. So that's very empowering. So that's one of the pieces that we use in terms of social justice with the mentoring program. And other things that we do, we have a leadership committee. Again, I think it's very inspiring and empowering when you give power to the students, and not you just tell them, this is what the program is going to be like, but there's a leadership committee, and they decide what topics they want to talk about, what conversations they want to have, what field trips they want to go. So that's for high school students, and then very briefly, New Horizons, which is a middle school mentoring program that we have with Tilson. It's a school partnership, so we partner with one of the schools in the neighborhood, and all the students are referred by the school, and they all have a one-on-one mentoring session. Each student has a mentor. They meet once a week for a couple of hours, and it's very intense. It's every week for 2 hours for 3 years. The component is it's a little bit of academic. We started with a lot of academics and then youth development, but we've been switching because we've seen that the development was way more important. Because they're not going to do homework if they don't feel comfortable and confident with who they are or what they're doing, in Tilson, and they don't know if they're Latino, if they're not Latino, if they're, what color they are. There's a lot of confusion, especially when you're 12 or 13. In addition, on top of being a teenager, but then you're first generation, second generation, or 1.5, because sometimes it gets all confusing. So the social justice piece in that mentoring program, again, our goal is to make sure that they're better citizens. And what I was mentioning earlier about that component that we're being mentored from all over the city, I think for us, that's a beautiful thing, because a lot of these kids, they have a triangle. They go to school, they go to Gads Hill, and they go home. That's a triangle. And that's the people they see, right? They don't know what's outside that triangle. So bringing people from Rogers Park, what's that? What's Rogers Park? Where is that? Or bringing a civil engineer, what do you do? Or we have a professor from Loyola. He teaches literature. And he actually invited a group of kids to go to one of the classrooms up in Loyola campus. So even though it's we're not marching, we're not fighting against something, but all these things create more, I think, socially just, community, because there's equal opportunities for everybody to enjoy different things. And just last thing, community garden. We started this year's community garden, and I'm really in love with that garden, so I think we're going to expand it because the kids just love, and they experienced the taste of kale for the first time, so that was good.
I'm kind of torn here as to what to talk about. On the one hand, I was instructed to talk about how youth could become involved and could learn about the social justice that I'm concerned about. But there's also, should I try to sell single payer? So, since a lot of people don't know what it is. So I'm going to try to do both of them as quickly as possible. I mean, not spend too much time, but this country, as I think most of us know, is way down on the list of the wealthy, industrialized countries on good healthcare outcomes. Although we spend more money than any of them do. We spend more money than they all do. So, and all the rest of them have some form of, certainly not for profit, regulated single-payer healthcare. So that's kind of strange. I found out when I was researching this that in 1948, the United Nations put out their Declaration of Human Rights. And some of the, two of the things in the Declaration of Human Rights had to do with economics and had to do with things like healthcare, etc. Guess who didn't sign? U.S. The U.S. signed the Declaration of Human Rights, but took out those two parts of the Declaration of Human Rights. This is rather disturbing. Anyway, so single payer, which is not strange is, like I said, after World War II, most of the industrialized countries instituted some form of single payer, nonprofit healthcare for all, is, kind of shunned still. And the reason it's shunned, you talk about the prison industrial complex. Well, I would like to add to that the medical industrial complex, the insurance companies, the drug companies, and the companies that provide equipment. These are very, very strong opponents of any kind of single-payer healthcare system, which would, which we would like to see as something like Medicare, which we understand. But a Medicare which has better parts to it. For example, drugs in Medicare are privatized. You still use the drug companies, and you can't negotiate for lower drug prices. We would like to see that thrown out. And the Medicare we're talking about, the healthcare for all, would not have private in it at all. The word private would be out. The concept private would be absolutely out. The other thing has to do with public health. You were saying that Detroit is now dumping its public health system. Well, that's also always a problem. Chicago's dumping its public health system too, its public health clinics and so on. Whenever you have a two-tiered system, where there's poor people who use the public system and the rest of the people, and I'm not even going to say rich, middle-class people have another system, you're going to have trouble. And we see what the trouble is now. An unequal healthcare system. So therefore, I think it's really important for people to fight for a single-payer healthcare system, and it's going to be longer than it is, and because they've cut it out of the dialogue. The reason you don't know about it is because it's never in the papers, and it wasn't part of the negotiations for Obamacare. It was never put up. Negotiations, and although there are some good things in Obamacare, it's still owned and operated by the insurance companies. So that's one thing. I'll give you at the end this. I think you should join, or at least look at our website to see some of the things that we're fighting against. We do things like, as I say, lobbying. We do things like education. We also do things like demonstrations. And it's a nationwide. Illinois single payer is Illinois, but there's some of this in every single state, practically, in the United States. And the Physicians for National Health program is very active also. Youth. Well, it's a hard sell for youth to say get involved in fighting for single payer or fighting around health care, because our youth, the young people, think they're immortal. And that's not a major issue for them. On the other hand, there are plenty of problems, and it's very important, I think, for the youth not to be pitted against the old, but to see that anybody could get sick, anybody could have trouble. I'll give you one example of a youth group that has come out of this. There is a group called Fly in Hyde Park and around the South Side, and these people, it's Fearless Youth. Something like for power, Fearless Youth. They have been fighting for a trauma unit in the side. They have had laydowns, sit-downs, marches, and they have they're teenagers, a lot of them, because one of their leaders was shot on a gang shooting and was taken, it was 2 blocks or 3 blocks from the University of Chicago emergency room. But the University of Chicago doesn't have a trauma unit. So they piled him in an ambulance and took him to Northwestern, bleeding all the way. And this really, 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 really hit the hearts of that youth. And they have, in the last, I think it was 2010 it happened, they have been actively fighting for a trauma unit. They went to look at trauma units and find out what's the difference between a trauma unit and an emergency room. And so they have become actively fighting for social justice. And so I think that that's really important to include that in anything that you're doing. I think mentoring I think it's wonderful to get better grades, and it's wonderful to lead a life of service and so on, but I think it's also important for people to learn that they have to fight sometimes for what they need.
So when I was thinking about this question this morning about what I should talk about today, because as I said, I'm not an advocate, so I'm not necessarily want to tell you what to say to young people. But what are some of the issues coming up in education that I think that young people, and as mentors of young people, you guys should be very aware of? And I think the number one thing is the issue of school choice, and how that puts so much onus on young people, their families, their teachers, their mentors, to know a lot about schools. In the next couple of years, in the last 10 years, we've opened 100 new schools. A lot of them charter schools, some of them magnet schools. And in the next 5 years, Mayor Rahm Emanuel said that we're going to open 60 more new schools. Now, without saying, okay, I think it's good or bad to open up new schools, coming up in the next year, they're going to unveil something called a single application for all high schools. This means that right now, you can apply for magnet high schools, you can apply for selective enrollment high schools, you can decide to go to your neighborhood high school, you could apply for one of a number of charter schools. Right now, about 20% of all high school students go to charter schools. There's a lot more high school charter school students than, well, not in numbers, but in percentages of high school charter school students. So what does that mean? It means that someone has to sit down with a single application, and instead of being able to apply to 10 different places, you're going to have to rank your 10 schools that you're interested in. So you'll have to say, okay, I'm most interested in going to Whitney Young. I'm second most interested in going to Perspectives High School, and I'm third most interested in going to Von Steuben Magnet School. Now they all have different real admissions process. One is a test, and then the other two are lotteries, but lotteries governed by completely different systems. But you're only going to get one offer. So how you rank these schools is, but at least this is how I understand that it's going to happen, and we're modeling after New York, and this is how New York does their enrollment process, their choice process. So how you rank those schools and what you know about those schools is going to be really important, because you're not going to get 3 offers. So you're going to have one offer. You're going to be told, you're going to get a letter sometime in March or April saying, you have been selected, the school that you are best qualified and that you got into is Von Steuben. But if you weren't really interested in going to Von Steuben, that was your number 5 choice, then you don't have any other choice. You have no other recourse. You might be able to try for a second round, but that's basically going to be your choice, because the second round might wind up you can't get into anywhere. And then you're stuck with your neighborhood choice, with your neighborhood school. And the other thing that this is going to create is, because there's going to be so many high schools of choice, between selective enrollments, charter schools, magnet schools, they're creating this whole IB program, which are also selective schools by a different selective measurement. Now, your neighborhood school is really going to be the school of last resort if it already is not. So for a long time, for a number of decades, the neighborhood schools have been sort of on the decline because of all these choices. Anybody who's got any facility is choosing to go somewhere else, right? So what does that leave a neighborhood school with? Test scores of incoming freshmen for the neighborhood schools have actually been decreasing. While you see the charter schools pulling the middle tier students who used to stabilize some of the neighborhood schools. So it's a really, really big issue to really inform. The other thing is, charter school, just because it's a charter school, is it a good school? Just because it's a magnet school, is it a good school? What are some of the things that you can help your youth look at? Now, a lot of people say, well, I want to go to the school because my friend's going to the school. Is that really a good school for you? Because a lot of charter schools have very, very specific rules. And there's a big push-out issue with charter schools, because if you don't follow the rules, you're in Noble Street, which is our biggest charter school network. And it's also our highest performing charter school network. But one of the things that's been widely written about Noble Street is that they have very, very strict rules. If you don't follow those rules, you wind up getting fined. If you don't meet your fine, they will send a collection agency after your parents, even if you leave the school. And also charter schools, they can threaten you with expulsion, but then tell you to go to your neighborhood school. And a lot of charter schools are doing this. So that if you're not choosing a school that's right for you. If you don't really understand the rules of that particular school, what the school focuses, and if you haven't bought into it, then that can be a really bad thing for a young person. So a lot of the charter schools say, well, we didn't expel him, we suggested he go down the street to his neighborhood high school, but there's nobody who finds out if that child went down the street to his neighborhood high school. You know, it's sort of a hope and a prayer, right, that the kid's going to go down the street to the neighborhood high school. So as mentors, getting a young person in this system that's going to be so defined by choice in the future, as we go along, and more than it even is defined by choice, it's really going to be important to know the schools. And, you know, I'm going to advocate for you guys going to Catalyst. We're at www.catalyst-chicago.org. I have brochures up here. If you fill it out, I will send you a weekly news update. We try and write about schools. We try and write the details about schools that you might not know about because you looked at someone's website and it gave a test score. Because like Noble Street, you might look at their test scores and say to yourself, hey, that looks like a school I'd like to send this young person who's really a good kid. But if that young person doesn't like to tuck in his shirt, doesn't like to wear safe shoes every day, that young person's always the one that's sort of strapping behind, that Noble Street might not be the right place for that young person. If that young person is the artist, maybe you want to try and get that young person to Shy Arts. You want to know a little bit more. They're creating all these international baccalaureate programs. You want to know what those programs are, so when a young person comes to you and says, I'm considering this school, you know, what are the factors that make a kid right for an international baccalaureate program? On the social justice side, as you start talking to your young people, if they start saying to you, hey, you know, there's no school in my area that I'm really that interested in going to. Maybe it's time to start advocating for schools in your neighborhood that they might be interested in going to. I mean, there's such a variety of schools out there, but they're not all over the city. We have a real lot of schools on the near west side. For some reason, I think it's because people think that it's an area that people will travel to. So, and it's sort of central. So they put a lot of charter schools there. Well, if you live out all the way out in Roseland, or you live all the way out in Rogers Park, it might not be so great that, you know, there's 5 great high schools, but they're all in the nearby side or in the area. You know, that's 2 or 4 hours of your day that you're going to be on the train. So advocating for good choices in your neighborhood. Now, the other side of this is there's a lot of people who don't think that this choice system is the way that the city should go. Because for one thing, with charter schools, those are private entities. Those are not, most of them are not-for-profits, but there are some for-profit companies that run charter schools. Not so much in Chicago, but outside of Chicago, there's only about 4 or 5 for-profit charter schools in Chicago. But that they're private organizations, there's a lot of ways that they're different than traditional public schools. Their school boards are not made up of parents. Their school boards are made up of corporate money people who can give money to the schools. A lot of the school board, these, you know, boards of charter schools are made up by lawyers and people who have absolutely no ties to the community. And what does that mean? That means that those schools are not beholden necessarily to your community or to your children. They're beholden to making that corporate board happy. So there's a lot of people who will debate whether we should be going in that direction. Should we be privatizing education? How can we hold private corporations as accountable as we try to hold public corporations? You know, there's a lot of questions in that way. I'm sorry, I can go on for on. But anyways, I think that you guys should, that as people who work with young people, staying really on top of the idea of choice and what choices are in your communities is a really big issue.
We're running over. Sorry, guys. There's so much good information here. So we got one more speaker, and then we'll wrap up.
Well, I'll keep it very short and different. I think one of the things that's happening in our schools is that there's too much of an emphasis on IQ, and there's very little emphasis on EQ. And so when I'm going out into an EQ is like your emotions, it's your heart. And when I'm working, we've done this thing over the past year where we have this cube of love. And you roll the cube and you talk about some aspect of love and you try to live it out during the day. Now it's amazing when you roll that and you have the different generations in the room and they talk about where they learned how to love. And the lady from Park Manor, she talked about how 50 years ago, students had it better in her estimation. And we're talking about real love deficits. And the more that I work, the more that I think that justice will flow out of love and peace, and that peace and love flow out of justice. And so, when I'm going out into the community or trying to find adult mentors, adult coaches, when you find somebody that really loves a school, or they love a community, they love the children in the community, and they want to do something, they can just do wonders. And the schools, and the lady from Catalyst is just right on about what's happening in the schools. They are becoming much more selective, and it's conditional love. You have to be so smart to pass this test, and then you get into our school, and once you're in the school, you're going to behave this way. You don't care what's going on in your house. If you don't behave that way, you're out of the school. And then you have other schools that are lottery, and they have nothing to do with the community, because everybody that goes to the school goes there through a lottery. And so they don't want to have anything to do with the community that's outside their door, because what happens if that parent wants their kid to go there and don't win the lottery, and they're in trouble. And it's really sad what's happening to the neighborhood schools, because they're taking, we're in the garden. We wanted to build these boxes for garden. I'll go over to the wood shop, talk to the wood teacher. It was first semester. The wood teacher had retired. Nobody's replaced him. The whole thing for wood shop, vocational school, it's going. And so I really, believe that the things that students need most, and it comes from my own family, it comes from being involved in the foster care system, it comes through adoption. They need love. And if we have people that do that within their lives, then they'll be freer to have a more just life, a more peaceful life, and a life where they don't get caught up into the prison industrial complex and other things that are threatening their lives.
All right, thank you guys so much. All the panelists, if they can stay or not, have been invited to, if they want to do more discussion in either of the breakout rooms. There's one over that way, and there's one over this way after this. You're more than welcome to do so. If you have to run out, you do, but you feel free to, grab that room quickly and ask the questions. So, thank you guys. Let's give them